Hello, everyone. I'm not Greg Olear.
And I am not LB.
But we are here tonight on Wednesday. There's a first time for everything. And this time it was playing the fabulous long intro to the 5/8. But in fact, you are not in a time warp, although time is very trippy these days. This is Wednesday. This is the 5/8 and we are thrilled that you've joined us here tonight. And it was actually lovely to have the Friday intro for us because they have all the cool characters, and we've got fabulous diners in our little dining room. So welcome to the show, Nadine.
Yeah, you know what was crossing my mind? I was thinking of the line from The Office when Dwight says, identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year.
It's true. It's not a joke. And we were not trying to steal the identities of Greg and LB. We do appreciate all of their help as we navigate this new show, which we're really happy to have so many people coming in right at the top of the hour. And today we have, this is a straight up show. So we have no guest, and I will not be the guest being interviewed. So we're just going to have a lovely conversation. But before we get to the first topic, as you know, this is the 5/8. This is your midweek break, and I'm Lisa Graves. Our plan is 5 stories, 8 minutes each, and a chance to refuel. We slow things down to sip, reflect, and remember, you are not alone. And we are not alone tonight because we now have the show program of the 5/8 opening us up. So how are you doing? How are you doing, Nadine?
I think everybody knows how we're doing at this point. I think we just skittering in. Actually, I'm doing surprisingly well. I am at the midpoint of an Equality Florida staff retreat, about to have a board meeting. It's been really good to be around good people doing important work and doing it very well. So hopefully I can transmit some of that energy, especially when we get to the glass half full. But how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, in part because it is August in Wisconsin, and since the whole show is sort of upside down, I'm going to do a mini glass half full, which is really a bowl half full of blueberries from my garden. So I wish that it was like smell-o-vision or taste-o-vision, and you all could share some fabulous blueberries. But it is one of the lovely things about August in the northern climate to have the chance to pick some blueberries while you're out for a walk. And remember that everything isn't Trump all the time, every hour, every minute, every second, although it can seem that way. And instead, there's lots of things to be grateful for, including blueberries.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I think that epitomizes the whole vibe of this show.
Yes,
in the middle of the week, you get to stop, you get to pick blueberries, and you get to hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
And talk about the 5 stories over 8 minutes.
Yep.
And
I want to say one thing before we jump into Texas, because I had quite the rant last week about Peter Thiel and vampirism, and I just want to say, I wasn't saying that he is an actual vampire. They don't exist, at least not to my knowledge, and I don't want to be disabused of my belief on that. Thank you all very much. But he said that he had not quite started to take the blood the last time he gave a comment about it. And he also said that on another occasion that he hadn't started injecting himself, which is not actually how it works. I'm not sure that was like kind of what kind of denial that was, because that's not how the transfusion process works. You don't inject yourself, but at least not to my knowledge. But I do think to your point last week, Nadine, like, the Silicon Valley vampirism in terms of our economy, in terms of our freedom, in terms of our democracy, these guys are up to a lot of no good. And now this week we're hearing news about Trump, not just, having J.D. Vance as his vice president, but basically suggesting that he really is the heir apparent. And we know how close Vance is with Thiel and with these Silicon Valley retrogrades who don't believe in democracy, who do not believe in the fundamental component of America, which is that we have a representative democracy that is supposed to advance the freedoms, protect the freedoms in the Constitution. Hasn't always done that, as we know really well. But certainly can't if it's a monarchy. Certainly can't if it's a kingdom of these guys. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on that. I've been thinking about it all week. Like,
you wanted to clarify that he's not actually draining the blood of the young from their necks to,
yes, for the record,
rehydrate.
There's no fangs involved.
Yeah.
None of that's happening.
The 5, 8.5 lawyers are happy. You've clarified that he does not actually sink his fangs into any necks. We got it.
Not that happened. Not that we got a threat letter. Nothing like that. Just
no.
I want to be clear about the nature of the monsters that we face. Yeah.
No, I'd be more concerned about being. Yeah. I'd be more concerned about being sued by vampires for the association.
but speaking of villains, Texas. What the hell is happening in Texas? You and I were talking before the show just briefly about Texas is the breeding ground of authoritarianism. So here we are.
Well, I think Texas and Florida leg wrestle to see who can scrape the bottom of the barrel in terms of leadership. And, this is an old game that authoritarians play. When you can't win the game, you change the map. And so this mid-decade redistricting is just a naked attempt to redraw representation without census data, pure partisan engineering. And it's not, it's vandalism. And the good news, it's a story of villains. And I think that the over 50 House Democrats who fled Texas in order to deny Republicans a quorum and block a redistricting plan that could, if it was enacted, add 5 Republican congressional districts. And this is not the time that redistricting happens. It's not driven by the census. It's purely driven by the fact that Trump knows his policies are unpopular. You've pointed out before that they've timed it so that the enactment of the worst things within that ugly billionaire
bailout
bill happen after midterms, before people feel all of the pain. But the reality is people are already feeling the pain, and they believe that the only way they can hold on to power in the midterms is to rig the election via the maps, which allow politicians to pick their voters, not voters to pick their representatives. So I just want to shout out the Democrats for doing this, even in the face of threats by Governor Abbott, saying he's going to arrest them, put them in prison for dereliction of duty, and all of these kinds of things. And there are lawyers among them who say, first of all, there's no law under which that could happen. Right. And even if he tries to concoct a law out of thin air, we're not, you can't serve us outside of the state. And so I just want to shout them out for the courage to do a bold thing, but also to name it as a governor who is completely abdicated, or should I say abdicated, his responsibility to the people of Texas to do the bidding, to be a lickspittle to this president and do his bidding. And they have rightly called it out. And I love that other Democrats, other governors, Democratic governors in Illinois, Pritzker, but other states too, are saying, we will provide safe haven. We are supporting you. We are physically standing side by side with you. That's the spirit that people want. Fighting back and not following Queensberry rules, but really being willing to scrap like a junkyard dog for the people.
Yeah. I mean, Abbott is just, bootlicker is exactly right. His willingness to do whatever he can to serve Trump, it's vile, actually. And, there are quorum rules for a reason. They're so that a minority or a strictly partisan majority can't just run roughshod over the law, over procedures, over common sense. And today we see Governor Lickspittle's little buddy over there in the Attorney General's office, Ken Paxton, who was, who was up for impeachment, but of course the partisan Lickspittle buddies of his in the Texas legislature blocked, basically voted against impeaching him, even though there was ample cause for doing
what was his scandal?
Well, I mean,
Because I get them confused now.
There was a multitude of scandals, one of which was that a number of the people who worked for him said that he was corrupt. People who were in the Texas Attorney General's office talked about his corruption, documented in their own ways corruption. And then some of his true heart, blood brothers basically defended him in the legislature there in that impeachment process, and he was acquitted on it, even though I think in any normal political environment, he would have been convicted and thrown out of his position as Attorney General of Texas. And today he announced that he was going to go after Beto O'Rourke for daring to support the Democrats in leaving the state to try to prevent this. It is exactly as you said. It is a hijacking of the political process in Texas in order to try to preserve a Republican control of the United States House of Representatives in the face of the most unpopular president in recent years, who is imposing erratic and dramatic and drastic, terrible cuts that are hurting people already, as you point out, and more so as these cuts and these policy changes go into effect in the months ahead. And they're doing it in part because John Roberts is the worst Chief Justice in the history of the American Supreme Court. In basically enabling partisan redistricting, partisan gerrymandering, partisan map drawing, even if it has a racially disparate impact, if it's called partisan, and then supposedly it's okay. But when you look at the division in America, you hear people who are independents or moderates, or maybe even on both sides of the political aisle, talk about divisiveness. That is such a distraction from the real cause. The true cause. There's a couple causes, in my view. One of the core causes of the divisiveness is lack of accountability for these members, because they're in districts where they've chosen their voters, and basically they can't get voted out by a Democrat. And when they are in gerrymandered districts, they don't have to account to you. They don't have to account to the people. They don't have to compromise. They don't have to find common ground. They just get to do the most right-wing thing for fear that they would be primaried by Trump if they don't go far enough to the right. And so that Republican gerrymander that has captured so many districts across the country, that, along with just extremist personality, vindictive personalities at the top, defiance, disrespect for the rule of law, for procedures, disrespect for people's human rights. But what's enabling that is these completely outrageous, unfair maps that John Roberts and his partisan buddies on the U.S. Supreme Court have allowed, and that should never have been allowed to take hold in this way.
Well, because the other thing that happens when you draw these just absolute ridiculous, you end up with districts where the people have almost nothing in common. Trying to go to a legislative in-district hearing or meet with your legislator might mean, a long drive that's really not possible for working people, but it ends up throwing people into the same district that have wildly different needs. And they also tend to end up packing all, Black voters, all, quote, minority voters into the same district, because that way they drain the representation from other places. So this is an old play, but the Democrats in Texas have done this before. In 2003, they were called the Killer D's and Texas 11, and they used walkouts to stall a previous attempt to do this. Back then, the GOP eventually just forced it through, but courts later struck down, I think, one district as having violated the Voting Rights Act. But what's going to happen this time, especially because Roberts and company have, loosened the restrictions? How does this play out, do you think?
Well, what's happening right now, and I really appreciate your lifting up the heroes, the courageous members who are leaving, who are trying to stop this outrageous theft of the midterm elections 18 months out, because they are attached at the teat to this monstrous man in the White House who is just demanding their fealty over anything and everything. And he knows he's in trouble. That's why he asked specifically for Texas to do this. But what's happening right now is that we see other states, other governors, for example, the governor of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, saying, you do this and we will fight fire with fire. We will do the same in Illinois. Similar statement coming out of New York, California.
Yeah.
If you want to do this, if you want to deny representation in order to try to basically make sure that almost every district in the entire state of Texas is Republican, then blue states are going to have to respond in order to not be disarmed, in order to not allow this outlandish, horrifying attempt really by the American people to hold these legislators accountable, to hold this president accountable. He's a lame duck president. He doesn't have another election unless he calls some stupid, ridiculous, unconstitutional faux election, Putin-esque nonsense in the future. The election we have coming is the one in 15 months from now, the midterm election. And he's trying to rig that with the help of his lickspittle brothers there in Texas, as you pointed out. I just think we should say Governor Lickspittle every single time and be like, Governor.
I love it. If I've accomplished nothing else on this show, I just want to know that I brought back Lickspittle.
Yes, it's such an apt term. But so they're so Democrats are ready to fight fire with fire, and I hope they do. If this goes down, I hope that we have other governors who are willing to respond to this and try to preserve the chance for the American people to have some firewall against these extremists who are, so willing to do the bidding of Trump, no matter the consequences to their constituents. The harm to Medicare, the harm to Social Security with these other, maneuvers that are going, the harm to, science. On a separate track, the idea that that RFK Jr. Has now stopped the funding for one of the most important COVID vaccines. We are facing these monstrous men who seem to have no apparent conscience for the consequences that they're imposing on people, things that will get people killed, like taking away Medicaid funding for people with disabilities who need that support for their home health care, who need that support. They're older Americans who, the other stuff isn't covered and they need that sort of nursing support. These are deadly policies, and that's why people are objecting. And then you have these jackasses, that's like the mildest term I could possibly use for them, who are trying to actually stop us, the American people, from having a fair election next year to hold those, I'm going to say bastards, but I really think I should say son of a Trump. That's my other thing I was trying to get accomplished at one point, was that we no longer call people bastards or son of a bitch. They should just be son of a Trump, to let these son of a Trumps, basically molest our democracy.
Wow. I know that you just teed up our next segment on Maxwell and the whisper campaign that has already begun to pardon her. And, it is something that is so hard to wrap one's brain around. The idea that Trump thinks he can get away with not only not releasing the Epstein files after playing that note over and over again, having Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, swear that the file was on her desk and ready to release. And it is so clear to everyone watching that Trump is in those files. We didn't need Elon Musk to tell us he was in those files. But now we see them taking these steps that people can only read in one of two ways: to move her from the maximum security facility that she was in, which is where they put people who molest children, to a minimum security facility that she is not eligible to be at. After meeting with Trump attorneys, Trump's DOJ, it is so clear that they are paving the way either for her to be released and in a deal that exonerates him in some way, or to be more accessible so that she can be silenced. These people govern like mobsters, and they think like mobsters, and they they solve their problems like mobsters solve their problems. And so really the only question is she going to be set up, in another country under another name, or is she going to get, I don't know, shivved in a minimum security facility? But what I've now seen, and the reason that I'm stating it so directly, even as I'm having a hard time imagining, is that you're beginning to see some of Trump's podcasters trotting out, this is their trial balloon. Hey, listen, Epstein was terrible. No doubt about it. That guy was terrible. But, the more I look at this Maxwell thing, I feel like she's being railroaded. I feel like maybe in the hysteria, which that can attend these kinds of trials, she got swept up. Ignore the fact that her actual argument isn't that. Her actual argument is she should have been included in the sweetheart deal that, pretty much protected Epstein. And so that they are paving the way for this narrative to justify releasing her. And, I imagine the only thing that is slowing them down is trying to find a credible script that will tie this all up in a bow, at least enough for his true believers to hold their place. But I talk to friends who are former MAGA folks who say the rupture is much deeper than Trump fully understands, and that the idea, even if you are J.D. Vance, who's obviously feeling like a Saudi prince these days. I don't know if you saw the story today where he completely what was it? He changed he made them accommodate his
Yes.
family's boating trip.
Yes.
And I don't even know what they do, but it's a huge deal to reroute the fjords or whatever. So, I mean, he's clearly feeling like he can behave any which way he wants without any concerns about the public reaction. But I think the narrative that is beginning to coalesce or cohere is one where he feels like he's in a win-win. He's either the heir apparent to a popular Trump or the one who will step into the throne once Trump, politically eviscerates himself by his handling of the Epstein files and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, I have a column coming tomorrow in Substack with Courier for my Grave Injustice column, which includes the section, a quid pro quo doesn't have to be said out loud to be obvious. And so we already have the first part of that quid pro quo, which was the transfer from a correctional institute to this prison camp. A prison camp where, one of the photos coming out of it is the woman who is at that camp. The woman from Theranos for her fraud is out there, using the barbells. So it's called the sort of Club Fed. It's called, country club place for people to stay. And so immediately after this interview with Trump's, I mean, technically former criminal defense attorney, who now holds the official day job at our expense of Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche, met with her. Then suddenly she's transferred. So she's already received a benefit, a huge benefit in terms of how she, the comfort for her sentence, the sentence that she's serving right now, which is a 20-year sentence. She was eligible for up to a almost 80-year prison sentence because she was convicted of really serious crimes. These, this was, grooming young girls, grooming teenagers to be a sexual slave, a sexual servant to Epstein, fondling them. She is someone who is a sexual predator. She is a repeat offender sexual predator over years, victimized a young woman after young woman after young woman to get her boyfriend or buddy off. Let me underscore that, because I think there's a lot of people that think of her as the madam or think of her as somebody who delivered these young girls and young women to him. But she sexually assaulted these girls. She sexually assaulted these women. She wasn't, there's just a way of characterizing her as though, she was somehow a few degrees less horrific
when you listen to the victims speak about the survivors of this, speak about it, they describe her as even more evil than Epstein, even more diabolical and cruel than Epstein.
Well, and part of what we know now is that she was not, like you said, not just procuring them, finding them, identifying these young women, but instructing them, touching them, and then their testimony is so compelling, and yet she is unrepentant. In depositions around this case in which some of these young women, now women, but who were then teens, were suing over this, she called them liars and fantasists. She is someone who has no remorse for the damage that she's done, and the damage that she did to one of the women who died earlier this year in a case that was ruled a suicide, even though she said that she would never commit suicide. Virginia Giuffre, or I keep missing that name, but I did look up Ghislaine, by the way, so that I don't pronounce the S. But the fact is, by the way, when I looked her up, I realized that Ghislaine is a name that is, the origin of that name is someone who is a hostage, treasure, to create peace in a kingdom. So basically marrying off a young girl to an opposing family in order to buy peace and build empire. And yet this is a woman who was basically, taking these young girls, abusing these young girls, and then putting them into these situations with these grotesque men like Epstein. And then this week in the New York Times, we have, a new expose of what the mansion in New York, just down the street from Donald Trump's mansion, one of his mansions in New York, you see Epstein's mansion, and there's a sculpture of a young Black girl in the form of a bride climbing a rope in his atrium. Now, it's described as a sculpture of a bride, but it's really a sculpture of a virgin. Let's be clear about what they were depicting in that mansion. The idea that a centerpiece of his mansion, of his art, is a young woman, seemingly a girl, a virgin on a rope, hanging, from his atrium ceiling. This cast of characters is just one of the worst set of people you could imagine. And then you have this series of, I'm going to call them lies by Trump about his relationship with Epstein. So he now says that he stopped letting Epstein come to his club in part because he was pissed off that Epstein hired Virginia Giuffre now away from the club to Epstein's place down the road in Palm Beach. That was 2000. Trump married Melania in 2005. Epstein was at that wedding.
Right.
When Trump finally, according to the reporters who saw the logbook for membership, it was October 2007 was the last time that Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago. That was the month that Epstein was basically charged and got into that plea agreement, basically that he was going to have to agree that he was a sex offender. That's where the cutoff happens, only at the moment when Epstein is going to have to register as a sex offender as part of the deal that got him a slap on the wrist, where he basically pleaded guilty to solicitation, not to being a predator toward children.
Right. Well, listen, and we should be very clear in the language that Trump used. It wasn't that simply that he hired her away. He said he stole her. And the family, her brother in particular, said, talked about how disgusting it was for the family to have to hear their sister, their daughter being talked about like a piece of property, like a piece of furniture that was taken. And this is a strange little aside, but when I was in college in the 80s, there was John Casablanca whose name
Yeah.
figures into this, who runs a modeling agency, the Elite Modeling Agency, but he also ran John Casablanca Modeling School. And when I was in college, there was this window in time where I was part of the John Casablanca Modeling Agency. And this is such a weird aside, but I did it because I needed money for school, and we would do modeling. For 3 hours of modeling, you can make $5,000. And I mean, I don't mean modeling with air quotes. I mean like pictures for sporting magazines, or
Right.
or for Dillard's, or that kind of thing. But what I saw within it were people. I needed money to get through college, but I saw so many girls and young women who, for them, this was everything. This was their whole dream. And that process of, I can't think of a better net with which to capture desperate young girls who believe that this is their pathway to a huge and amazing life. And just how sinister that entire process was. Just, again, I knew this wasn't my path. I would go for jobs and not even bother to shave my legs. My point is, this was not my path, but for people who they would just tempt with this brass, ring. You can see in the stories of these young girls and how they targeted the ones who had the least kind of support, the least family support, the most trouble. I'm so devastated by the woman who, as a young girl, worked for Epstein, and he built her up and told her all kinds of things. Her mother had a tumor, I think. He said, "Oh yeah, bring in the x-rays, show, let's see what's going on, because my Rolodex is full of the best surgeons, the best medical care." And when she did, thinking that this man who had taken an interest in her career was going to help, he basically said, "Not only can I get her access to that, I can shut down access completely. So what are you going to do to save your mother's life?" The evil of this. And in some ways, I may have said this previously, I really wish we could have a sexual abuse survivors march on Washington. I wish we could figure out how in this moment where I think there are some people waking up, some people who'd been within that Trump camp waking up, because we keep living in a world where we don't quite want to face the prevalence of sexual violence against women, against girls, against children. And when we get close to it, like the Me Too movement, the backlash to it is so hateful, so horrible. And but yet we can't roll this boulder halfway up the mountain. We have to get it all the way to the top and push it down the other side, because this is sort of the I said it before, but this is the thing America doesn't want to face, in the same way it doesn't want to face slavery, in the same way it doesn't want to face our actual origin. It wants to cling to a myth, and we are going to have to face this. It's why religious organizations with long histories of abuse, of horrific abuse, have the audacity to fix their mouths to say anything about drag queens, about the LGBTQ community. You cannot do a Google search to see who's inflicting these horrors on children. And if it ain't billionaires and rich, decadent Caligula time, folks like this, it is pastors, preachers, religious leaders, people who are in a place where their power insulates them, or their stature within a religious organization makes it impossible to challenge them. And even when they're exposed, even when they are caught without a doubt, they're moved to another place. The sweetheart deal that Epstein had was basically, you can check in at night, but you can live in your house during the day. That's how you're going to serve your time for being a sexual predator in the first deal. And he was still doing it during the daytime. He was still, his operations were operating as usual.
Yeah,
So
in fact,
we're going to have to confront it. We're going to have to confront it.
They created a science institute at his lawyer's law firm. That was where he went to work during the day, supposedly. I mean, it was just a scam of a scam of a scam. And you're so right. I mean, there really needs to be a reckoning. There are so many women who have survived sexual abuse, rape, harassment, and more. And you're right. This country has not recognized, has failed to reckon with it, and in fact has installed people into positions at the highest levels of power, including in the White House, who've been accused of serious sexual violence, who've been, in the case of Trump, found by a civil jury to have sexually abused a woman, along with these other charges that he's denied, but that in that instance, the jury found in her favor. And you had allegations regarding the Secretary of Defense. We have 2 men out of 9 people in the Supreme Court who were accused of, one of really grotesque sexual harassment, and the other of attempting to rape a classmate. And they got confirmed, one of them directly because of Trump. And, and this problem that the Republican Party has with how they approach this issue, it goes way back. It's not that it's only them, but predominantly there has been so much of this happening on the right, and certainly in this administration with some of the people who have ascended. But when I was at the Justice Department, one of my jobs was to work on the implementation of the congressional law against human trafficking, against sexual slavery in the United States, as well as human trafficking for, sweatshops. And when Ashcroft came in for George W. Bush as the Attorney General, the first thing they did was have the faith-based initiative issue a command that everyone at the Justice Department had to report to them where grant money was going out into the world, so that they could basically redirect that money to their faith-based buddies that helped Bush get into a position where the Supreme Court could make him president in 2001. But I'm sitting in my office at the Justice Department working on my notebooks, because I was a career attorney, a deputy assistant attorney general. And I'm working on my, work during this transition as Ashcroft comes in, and the Justice Department television station is on, and I see none other than John Ashcroft announcing that he is redirecting funds that were going to groups that were experienced in helping survivors of sexual abuse, survivors of international prostitution rings, redirecting that money to an evangelical group because those women needed God. That's what they needed. They didn't need the T visas or the U visas to keep them there necessarily to testify against their abusers and these traffickers. They needed to be helped by a religious organization that had no real experience handling helping people who were part of the human slave trade, but instead had a religious solution. And we're going to get money from the George W. Bush administration to do that, to take over that aid. And it was shocking. It was one of the reasons why I left the Justice Department.
And Project 2025 is all of that on steroids. Well, speaking of horrible men with dodgy sexual violence histories, we need to talk about what Pete Hegseth and his brother. What is his brother's name? His brother is his.
Oh yes, I'll grab it. I'll grab his brother because I honestly said
Philip Hegseth.
Said, there's a brother. That's why I wrote that little. What? Yes. There's another Hegseth.
Yes.
How is this?
Yes, one Hegseth wasn't bad enough.
Yeah.
There's 2 Hegseths at least, and once again, they've got caught in a sort of a violating the security protocols, right? So there's a leaked memo from Philip Hegseth, who is the senior advisor to his brother. Oh God. It's just like, how did that become normal?
A mobster sort of situation.
Yeah,
like,
it is an
why is the brother or why is the wife on the Signal chat? Like, what is happening here? Yeah.
But this leaked memo outlines this strategy to deploy U.S. Marines and National Guard to assist in mass deportation quote, for years to come, right? And in this memo, they basically are talking about having DHS, Kristi Noem, authorize the military arrests and drone use in LA, a level of domestic militarization that makes me think about our guest the other week, Zarina Zabriskie, talking about the drones as hunting people. But part of it was talking about using a designation of immigrants as terrorists to get around the posse comitatus, the limits on using military in civilian law enforcement. So equating immigrants and dissidents, we should be clear that Trump is not just saying immigrants when he talks about it, or when he's overheard talking about expanding the El Salvador gulags. He's not just talking about deportation. He's talking about imprisoning dissidents. But what they want to do is, by relabeling people as terrorists, be able to get around that prohibition. And so here we are heading toward precisely the thing we knew he wanted to do months and months ago, and they've been putting the pieces together. And this is a line that we cannot permit to be crossed. We cannot allow, no matter how much they flood the zone, this is a line we cannot allow them to normalize, and people have got to be ready to raise hell.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Nadine. And I'm going to have to start looking into the broader Hegseth onomy, or whatever it is, the Hegseth mafia or whatever, because this is, just the hubris of these people to think that they should take these actions against their fellow Americans, people who actually are not worthy of the positions they hold. In the case of Hegseth and his family, his brother, his wife aren't even Senate confirmed, with the lame, right-wing Republican bootlicking Senate that we have, willing to basically approve almost everyone Trump wants, with a few exceptions, and putting together a despicable, immoral memo to use force against the American people. It is truly, now I'm on like the third topic, which is truly vile, debased, unworthy of unworthy of a position of public trust in our country, or a position adjacent, I suppose.
Yeah. And again, this is one of those places where, in the memo, they admit that the deployment the first time did not work the way they hoped it would.
Yeah. Trial run.
Right. The trial run. And if there is no reaction, it is practice. And so, but I see more and more organizing among veterans. I see more and more organizing among military folks who are saying, this is not what we signed up for. This is not the job we are supposed to be doing. And we've got to have those conversations with our friends and family and relatives, because a question is going to be called, and you're going to have to answer that question at some level. And so, here we are.
Serve, or an oath to uphold the Constitution that does not make Trump king, that does not allow him to fire on the American people, to drone the American people. And then meanwhile, we have him, Trump, off trying to, plotting to send people to other countries, yet another country they put on the list as part of their terror campaign. But then we have things happening here in the US that are also really destabilizing, like the firing of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.
Yeah.
And not that they're equivalent. This is like a multifaceted Steve Bannon, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, just bombardment that we've been facing over these past 6 months of almost hour by hour acts of cruelty, or acts of defiance of the law, or disregard for the law or the norms. And now we have Trump having a little temper tantrum in his little, fisty way that he, claims that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is somehow jimmying the numbers, and it isn't his crap policies that are harming our economy and making it harder for people to pay for groceries and the goods that they want. It's somehow not him. Nothing's ever him. But it's somehow the statisticians who've been keeping these stats the same way, no matter who's president, year in, year out. And the numbers are what the numbers are. And yet he can't take it because, in the words of a famous film, he can't handle the truth. And so he just fired the head of BLS and has been, threatening basically to fire the head of the Fed, including that ridiculous sort of hard hat, bizarro performance in which he takes a piece of paper out of his lapel as if it means anything, as if there's a word of truth on it, to try to claim that Jerome Powell is, run amok with the cash in terms of a renovation of the Fed building,
right?
Counting in old buildings from 8 years ago that were built on Trump's watch and were finished. Meanwhile, Trump is destroying the Rose Garden and destroying ballrooms to make our White House, a White House that he is, as God is my witness, or as the universe is my witness, he is not the permanent resident of the White House, and yet he is destroying destroying the place to make it gaudy and make it more like Mar-a-Lago and build some new ballroom and tear down the Rose Garden for his own pleasure. And we already saw what they did the last time around in their destruction toward our White House, the people's White House.
Well, and yes, we should be clear. He's hardly ever there because he's always billing the American people for staying at his own properties. Setting that aside, here's the thing that that actually makes me hopeful. One, on Fox News of all places, Trump got grilled about the firing of the Bureau of Labor Statistics director. And he tried to say, oh, those numbers, they're cooked. Because what evidence do you have? Why should people believe that? And why would anybody trust who you would replace her with? I mean, within Fox News, there are people going, this is a weird and disturbing thing for the average person to see, him firing the ref. But for people within the financial industry, this is sort of like, if we are unhinged from reality, if we are unmoored from reality, how do we even begin to assess? It's like he smashed the compass on the ground in order to, he wants to blame anybody but himself. But he lit the fuse. He's the one who has caused this inflation. He's the one who is up and down on tariffs as part of his shakedown of industries and countries. He is the one that is driving this. And I love that Fed Chair Jerome Powell, while Trump was just spouting absolute nonsense and making these outlandish claims, claims that are so stupid. The one he talks about, the pharmaceuticals, we're going to drop those prices, 1,300%. And everyone's going, none of these numbers add up. But Powell did something that few have done. He told him to his face, like, that's not true. You're including things that aren't included. And anytime Powell is asked, are you afraid that Trump will remove you? That's against the law. Will you step down if he pressures you? No. Do you want to elaborate on that? No. And it's just, that is the gray rock energy that everybody needs to give this guy. So yeah, Powell is still standing. Trump is still flapping his arms and trying with all of his might to get us to talk about anything except Epstein. And it's not really working.
I want to see a series of videos with Trump and Powell with different dialogue, just like that one about, like sort of like
Hitler and the
Hitler one where it's like
taking his glasses off. Yeah,
that one. I want to see that because it's just such a good, like, irrational, buffoon, emperor with no clothes, and then rational guy going, no, this is not at all accurate. Or like that commercial from a few years back where it was like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, Yeah. That's the energy we need. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know what? we now come to the part of our show that we call the glass half full, and I think this is a perfect segue because the glass half full is not to gloss over the things that are broken, but to remind ourselves that there is still good work happening. There's still beautiful stories unfolding, and hopefully this is a moment where we fill our cup even just a little. And so tonight, I think if there was a theme to our show tonight, it would be that the arsonists have been put in charge of the fires, right? These are the people who are causing all of these problems. But in the midst of it, people are finding ways to be defiant. And Timothy Snyder writes about this on Tyranny, that it's important for us to work to preserve institutions, even ones that are flawed and busted and under attack. He said, even in countries where voting does not, voting is rigged. You vote not because you think you'll influence the outcome, but you vote to hold on to the idea that voting ought to matter. And you go to court, even if the deck is stacked, by a Roberts Supreme Court, not because you think you're going to get justice every time, but because you're trying to hold on to the idea that justice ought to be, that we should be a country of laws, not men. And so for me, at the same time, we try to figure out how to preserve, how to restore, and how to renew these institutions. We also have to invest in the things that allow us to take care of each other in the here and now. Yep. And movements are filled with these moments, whether it's the Black Panthers coming up with a breakfast program for children, or whether it's the Euromaidan, the Václav Havel, every movement has built a world as it ought to be, while living in a world that is a mess. And so for our glass half full, I just want to bring everybody's attention to the streets of Los Angeles, where a group called Union del Barrio is doing something extraordinary, something that's really powerful, and it is rooted in decades of organizing. So here's the deal. So in neighborhoods near Terminal Island and South LA, volunteers have revived this old tactic with the urgency that the assault they're experiencing requires. They're patrolling, they're watching, they're documenting ICE raids before they're happening. They're seeing where these unmarked vans show up, right? They're seeing where they congregate in parking lots. In St. Pete, Florida, the pastor of a big church basically wrote a letter because police were congregating for a raid in front of their church and said, "You're not welcome here. If you use my parking lot again as a staging area, I'll bill you $10,000. So it's that same spirit. But immediately they raise the alarms. Social media posts, phone trees. They alert legal teams, and they call it what it is: community defense. And it is saving lives. It's saving families from being torn apart. And these are veteran organizers, and they're responding in a place where racial profiling. The ACLUs had to go to court because they're just saying it out loud. If you have a Hispanic name, they're going after you. If you have brown or black skin, they're coming after you. But they've trained 750 volunteers in just a couple of months, creating this citywide early warning system against family separation and racial terror. And what is really beautiful, I mean, I got tears in my eyes when I was reading this. They said, our message is, you don't get to disappear our neighbors quietly. And so with clipboards and car patrols and cameras, they're calling people, be brave with us, be strong with us, and let us look out for our neighbors. Even when laws are being weaponized, people still have power. And Los Angeles is the front line. They intend not just to have the Marines show up once, they intend to go back. They intend to inflict harm after harm, but people are responding with resistance. This is what it looks like when it's organized and when it's rooted in love of community, not fear of authority. So to the people of Los Angeles, looking out for their neighbors, That's a glass half full in my book.
Yes. Hear, hear.
It's so good to see you, Lisa. It's so good to see everybody in the chat. We do get to glance at the chat now and then, and thank you for somebody for letting us know that JD Vance made them release the water from a dam so he and his family can go kayaking.
Insane.
That's madness. Well, that's it for tonight. I'm Nadine Smith, proud to be here alongside Lisa Graves. Thanks for making space for the 5-8.5. We are your midweek breather, a dose of outrage and a spark of hope, we hope. And be sure to catch the 5-8, the real 5-8, with Greg Oliar and Stephanie Koff. Friday at 8 p.m. right here on this channel. I wonder if they'll do our intro just to even it out.
Well, we're going to do their outro, so just be
that's right.
All right. Have a nice night, everyone. See you next time.